World leaders at the COP26 summit in Glasgow struck a deal to stave off the dangerous climate change. It is the first ever climate deal to explicitly plan to reduce coal, the worst fossil fuel for greenhouse gases. But critics say the pledges don't go far enough to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by the end of mid-century. Welcome to Green Angle. I am Esther Mapariola. On November the 13th, delegates from 197 countries agreed a new deal known as the Glasgow Climate Pact, aimed at avoiding the dangerous climate change. The pact reaffirms the Paris Agreement in 2015 of holding the increase of global temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursuing efforts to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, which requires deep and sustained reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions. COP26, otherwise known as the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, had 4 goals which served as a guide during the course of negotiations. Secure a net zero by mid-century, keep global warming to 1.5 degrees within reach, adapt to protect communities and natural habitats, mobilize finance, and work together to deliver. After 2 weeks of intense negotiations, 197 countries reached a global agreement to reduce the worst impact of climate change by 2050. For the first time at a COP conference, there was a plan to reduce the use of coal, which is responsible for 40% of carbon emissions. However, countries only agreed to phase down rather than phase out coal.
We can end the use of coal-fired power stations. We can do it by 2040 in the developing world, 2030 in the richer nations. We can plant hundreds of millions of trees, 1 trillion. It's not technologically difficult. And halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. Not just because it's a spiritually uplifting and beautiful thing to do, but because that is the way to restore the balance of nature and to fix carbon in the air. We can end the use of coal-fired power stations. We can do it by 2040 in the developing world, 2030 in the richer nations.
There was also an agreed pledge to increase money to help poor countries cope with the effects of climate change and make the switch to clean energy. Leaders also agreed to stop deforestation by 2030, which is seen as vital because trees absorb vast amounts of carbon emissions.
We can plant hundreds of millions of trees, 1 trillion. It's not technologically difficult. And halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. Not just because it's a spiritually uplifting and beautiful thing to do, but because that is the way to restore the balance of nature and to fix carbon in the air.
My plea today is for countries to come together to create the environment that enables every sector of industry to take the action required. We know this will take trillions, not billions of dollars. We also know that countries, many of whom are burdened by growing levels of debt, simply cannot afford to go green. How do we do it? First, how do we get the private sector all pulling in the same direction? After nearly 2 years now of consultation, CEOs have told me that we need to bring together global industries to map out, in very practical terms, what it will take to make the transition. Who pays and how? We need to align private investment behind these industry strategies to help finance the transition efforts, which means building the confidence of investors so that the financial risk is reduced. Crucially, investment is needed to help transition from coal to clean energy.
A scheme to cut 30% of methane emissions by 2030 was agreed by more than 100 countries,
Methane is currently responsible for a third of human-generated warming.
As we open this much-anticipated climate conference, we are still heading for climate disaster. Young people know it. Every country sees it. Small island developing states and other vulnerable ones live it. And for them, failure is not an option. Failure is a death sentence. A number of countries have made credible commitments to net zero emissions by mid-century. Many have pulled the plug on international financing of coal. Over 700 cities are leading the way to carbon neutrality, and the private sector is waking up. Let's have no illusions. If commitments fall short by the end of this COP, countries must revisit their national climate plans and policies, not every 5 years, every year, every moment, until keeping to 1.5 degrees is assured, until subsidies to fossil fuels end, until there is a price on carbon, until coal is phased out.
However, most commitments made at the climate change conference will have to be self-policed. Only a few countries are making their pledges legally binding. Next year's COP27 summit is in Egypt.
In the meantime, President Muhammadu Buhari says Nigeria will cut its carbon emissions to net zero by 2060. He says climate change isn't about the problem of the future, but about what is already facing the country, such as desertification in the north, drought in the center, pollution in the coast. And the government is looking for partners, technology and finance to make cleaner and efficient use of available resources for a more stable transition in energy markets. Now, some environmental activists shared their thoughts on the outcome of the climate change conference in Glasgow and expectations. Thank you for joining us, Wumi Ogunde, Olumide Ido. First off, let me have your reactions now. What are your thoughts on the outcome of the climate change summit in Glasgow? Do you think it achieved its goals?
There are things that are specifically harming the earth that we need to begin to reduce significantly. Developed country that has the opportunity for use of electric vehicles and reducing fossil fuels, reducing carbon emission in their manufacturing, creating sustainable manufacturing. Those are steps that need to be put in place. And then countries, world leaders that can drive this sort of change, they need to put their back into it to make sure that the the biggest polluters are being held accountable for all the pollution that is being caused by their organizations and businesses.
And how confident are you that these commitments will keep global temperatures at 1.5 degrees?
We can't say in Nigeria that we will reach a complete phase out by 2030. No, we haven't even started. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface. So how realistically can we meet this? So I think that sometimes when, obviously, when negotiations go on like this, countries actually honestly need to look at where they are, which is what some people did come to and say that, look, this is where we are now, and we need to sort of agree. But we also, so the conversations, I would say that the conversations of all this has been going on for long. It's not today that the conversations are starting. We've had the Paris Agreement, we've had, everyone, putting back their feet to say, oh, they are supporting the earth, they want to do this and all of that. However, that constant reevaluation and making sure we hold people accountable is what we need.
We need to get the world's biggest producer, or biggest coal producers, to actually commit to that promises. If we say 2040 or 2030, what are going to be the mechanisms for them to say we are reducing the issue of this coal issue? So it's very, very important that those 40 countries that have promised to actually agree to reduce or to phase out coal by 2030, and some other bigger countries, we all know them. If they can put their mind and put on mechanism for that process before 2040, then I think the world will be a better place for all.
And there were also commitments to increase in funding for climate change adaptation as developed countries were urged to double their support to developing countries by 2025. What do you make of this, and how confident are you that the monies will be used for these purposes?
Believe you me, a lot of people are very skeptical about the promises because people are already saying, oh, it's blah, blah, blah. It's going to be greenwashing. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. Another year of empty promises and all that. So we're truly hoping that, they will prove us wrong and all the set agendas that have been promised will be delivered according to, I believe that what people even need to see, what the world needs to see is that you don't even have to get to the promised land in the time you have even set. But if we see that there's that constant move and push towards where we're going, then there's hope for the future. There's hope for all of us. There's hope for, the next generation.
Okay, so actually, it has actually helped us to, the conference actually revealed just how the ode to fossil fuel interests still remains something that is very, very sad. And despite all the increasing, promises for the future of humanity, we see that the conversation of fossil fuel is not that really touched. And I call it greenwashing because if you really want the global south or the developing countries to actually gain or get that justice that we're looking at, then you need to start looking at how you cover your emission.
Now, Olumide, all countries, including Nigeria, agreed to revisit and strengthen their current emission targets to 2030, known as the nationally determined contributions. What are your thoughts on this?
All those 7 sectors under the national determined contribution, we need to look at them critically. And we have water, we have waste management, we have energy, we have agriculture and other ones. We need to look at them critically to see how this can drive sustainable innovation and can drive environmental sustainability. Because if we don't do that, it's just like the way we have the SDGs, they have targets. That is how we have our national determined contribution with different targets, different things that we need to meet in particular period. And the collaboration and working together of all these sectors that are laid down on the national determined contribution is very, very important as well. But I would say that if there's continuity in these agreements, because we have government that change every time. If there's a continuity in those agreements, if there's continuity in those 7 sectors, then we'll be able to achieve more and do more for the benefit of the people and the planet. So our national determined contribution is actually another scorecard or another platform for us to achieve the so-called 2060 reduction of our emissions. So if you can work on that, then we are actually getting to meet or to solve problem on ground, not just on paper.
All right, Wumi, there were disappointments by countries on the failure of the COP26 to phase out coals, the single biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions. What do you make of this?
There's that constant dependency of, we need to wait for aid, we need to wait for this, and we need to take our mindset away from that and focus on what are the internal solutions that may not even cost us so much to begin to rectify. Why so? Because are we going to say that if the money is not disbursed into Africa or into some specific areas, we are not going to do anything? That should not be our claim. We should actually look inwards to create create solutions that can be replicated even other places around the world. And then we know we are taking these issues seriously.
And Olumide, what do you have to say about this?
When you make a commitment, when you promise somebody something, what are the measures you put in place to make sure that this funding gets to the right people? Secondly, the promise I've started from Paris agreements. In 2019, they make a commitment of 100 billion delivery per year. But we have 2020, they might have an excuse of the COVID. This 2021, what is happening to those promises? How many countries have been able to tap into that funding? And let us also not forget that countries or developing countries also need capacity to access this finance. And if we don't have capacity, if we don't have the technical support, or we don't have the intellectual people that can help us to develop proposals that can access this kind of fund, then we are just deceiving ourselves. We are just sitting down on those promises and seeing those money in figures on paper, but they will never reflect into our bank account back home. And I can also say that no stakeholders is we are no more a spectator. We want to also be part of your implementation, processes, policy formation, and development. If we can do that and can give access to those opportunities, then government commitment will actually go a long way. So I'm very optimistic that Nigeria will be a better place for all.
I'd like to thank you for being a part of this discussion.
Thank you.
You're still on to Green Angle. Coming up after this break, what do you make of old, worn-out tires? Find out how a team of young entrepreneurs are transforming this kind of waste into valuables that are now in high demand. Available statistics show that nearly 3 billion automobile tires were produced worldwide in 2019 alone, and most of them end up in landfills where they risk contaminating the environment, or worse, through fires that release toxic gases into the atmosphere. Well, we took a trip to Ibadan, where a Nigerian startup is converting these tires into durable, eco-friendly materials, providing sustainable solutions.
Tires. This thick rubber ring, often filled with air, allows a vehicle to stick to the road surface and to travel over the ground more easily. But what happens when these tires become old and worn out? They are often thrown away, used to burn anything, and they constitute an environmental nuisance, serving as a breeding ground for mosquitoes and other pests. In Ibadan, southwest Nigeria, a recycling plant is transforming these old tires into paving bricks, floor tiles, rubber mats, and other products. Its mission is to utilize recycled materials to develop durable, eco-friendly products that can be used in day-to-day operations.
When you burn tires, it causes a lot of environmental hazards, like it emits carbon monoxide, and this depletes the ozone layer. We don't burn, we recycle tires, and by so we are saving the environment from pollution. Another benefit is for these tires that they are non-biodegradable. They cannot decompose. So people dump tires indiscriminately. They block drainages. They cause mosquitoes. When they bring these tires to us, you are saving the country from malaria.
With more than 100 employees, Freetown Waste started operations in 2020 and has recycled more than 100,000 tires, from speed bumps to soft paving for playgrounds.
As at date, we have about 130 staff, and they get paid every month, right? Then we have over 200 indirect agents. What I mean by that is, apart from the guys supplying us these scrap tires, we also have people who does the installation, who are also agents who get paid. So we've actually created job opportunities, not just for our core staff that resumes here every day, but for all other agents that does the installation, that also does the tire collection for us as well.
Sometimes, like the ones we have there,
Managed by a team of professionals, its goal is to recycle 15 million tires per year.
We all know the problems that solid waste pose in the environment, and unfortunately, scrap tires are not biodegradable. What I mean by that is they don't decompose on their own. We all know it's a problem to the environment. It causes flooding, it breeds mosquitoes, it's a tool of violence during protests, during riots, even for during jungle justice. We see what youths, what they do with scrap tires as well. There is no proper method of scrap tire disposal in Nigeria, right? Most of them are in the drainages, most of them are in the landfills, most of them are in the streets, causing havoc and causing chaos, right? So this was what propelled my company, Freetown Waste Recycle Limited, to come up to say, okay, what can we do with these scrap tires? Okay, let's go into recycling of these scrap tires. Let's use them to manufacture rubber mats, rubber rolls, rubber ties, which are eco-friendly products, which can be used at home, in schools, in offices, and so on and so forth. The idea was born in 2018, right? So the company was incorporated in 2018, but we commenced operation fully November in 2020. So operation-wise, we are just a year. What we are providing is something new.
The company sources for most of these old tires from its vendors and vulcanizers, and they are paid 90 naira per tire.
Safer than it. Scrap tires are everywhere, right? So they are everywhere in the streets and with vulcanizers. So the entire tire recycling venture is a value chain. So what we did was to identify where to outsource and where to play in. So what we did was to engage collection agents, right? We call them registered vendors. So these vendors, they go out to collect these tires from vulcanizers, from off the streets, off the landfills, and they bring them to us. Then we compensate them for that. Derivatives from our tires, scrap tires, like what we do in Freetown Waste, the products are many, but for now we focused on flooring. So we do produce rubber ties, we produce rubber rolls, rubber mats, caps, that's landscaping caps they use for borders and all that. The door mats, foot mats, a whole lot of products.
Aside from recycling these old worn-out tires, Freetown Waste plans to recycle plastics and other reusables as part of its own measure in safeguarding the environment.
We are also looking at not just scrap tires alone. We are looking at going into all other recyclables like plastic, PET bottles, aluminum cans, cartons, and all that. So this is just like the first phase of us doing recycling. Apart from that as well, we are looking at also expanding our operations nationwide. We are looking at setting up in all other regions nationwide as well, and also neighboring West African countries as well. Prior to this time, these products actually exist in the market. They are all imported from China, from India, and all other countries of the world. But we are the first doing it in Nigeria. So people are beginning to see that, oh, these are not imported products. These are products made in Nigeria, and they can actually be used for flooring, children playgrounds, schools, gyms. So people are beginning to realize that, oh, that our products are valuable and they can substitute for all other existing flooring products.
And that's about it on today's show. Until I come your way next time, remember, together we can build a sustainable world. I am Esther Makwariola. Bye for now.